Every morning, you step outside your front door. Maybe to water a plant, maybe just to feel the air. It's a quiet, familiar moment. But what if I told you that the very tree beside you could be quietly closing the door to your prosperity? You see, not every plant is harmless. Not every green leaf brings peace. Some trees, if placed wrong, if chosen blindly, act like silent barriers. They block the invisible stream of wealth, comfort, and opportunity from ever reaching your home. While others quietly open a doorway, they don't shout, they don't sparkle. They simply stand there like a silent friend, gently guiding fortune inside day after day. And here's the truth most homeowners never hear. Out of all the trees people plant for beauty or shade, only a handful are considered true prosperity conductors in Feng Shui. Even fewer match the energy of your house and your personal path. But when two of them do, something shifts. Harmony deepens, visitors linger, and the energy in your life begins to move in a new direction. So now, the real question isn't do you have plants at your door, it's, seedling, have you planted the ones that invite wealth to stay? Section 1. Not every tree is a blessing. Some close more doors than they open. It starts innocently. You walk past a garden store. A tree catches your eye, full of life, leafy, maybe even fragrant. It feels right. You bring it home and place it near your front door, believing it will brighten the space, add a sense of vitality. And for a while it does, but weeks pass, then months, and slowly things begin to feel off. The house seems heavier. The mood lingers. Opportunities feel harder to reach, even though you're doing everything right. Could it be the tree? In Feng Shui, the space directly in front of your home is sacred. It's called the mouth of Kai, the entranceway through which all energy, good or bad, flows into your life. It's not just a porch, it's not just a pathway, it's a directional gate, a filter, a breathing space between the outer world and your inner one. The wrong tree, especially in the wrong place, becomes more than a decorative mistake. It becomes an energetic obstruction. Some trees are simply too large. Their canopy extends beyond the natural breadth of the entrance. The leaves droop over the doorway, creating shadow, stillness, and a sensation of weight. Others have sharp leaves, tangled roots, or erratic growth patterns that disrupt harmony rather than promote it. Some, like cacti or thorny species, create subtle aggression, a defense posture at the very point where energy is meant to flow inward gently. These trees might look beautiful, but energetically they say, "Go away." And energy listens. When the entrance of your home is visually or energetically blocked, fortune doesn't know where to land. Good luck hesitates. Visitors feel unwelcome, though they can't explain why. Business stagnates, health feels stuck. Relationships lose ease. And often, the people living inside begin to experience a kind of mental or emotional fog. Small anxieties, heavier mornings, friction in conversation, a sense of resistance they can't quite place. All because something, quite literally, is standing in the way. And here's the part few talk about. It doesn't take a massive tree to create this effect. Even a potted plant, if positioned poorly, misaligned with the door or clashing with the energy of the space, can alter the flow of your entire home. Imagine trying to breathe deeply with a pillow pressed gently against your nose. You can breathe, but it's harder, slower, more tiring. That's how a blocked entrance feels to the Kai of your home. Now ask yourself, what's sitting at your front door right now? Is it letting the good in or softly pushing it away? If you've ever had the feeling that luck arrives but never stays, or that happiness is close but always slightly out of reach, it may not be your actions that need adjusting. It may be your entrance. The first step to correcting this isn't to add more. It's to remove, stand at your front door, look outward, then look back in. Does the space feel open, flowing, light, or cluttered, shadowed, blocked? Before planting anything new, before calling in prosperity or love or success, clear the gate. Create room for energy to move. Let the breath of your home stretch, flow, and welcome. Because even the most powerful wealth-attracting tree, when placed at the wrong time in the wrong spot, becomes a quiet thief. And not every thief steals money. Some steal momentum, some steal peace. So before we discover the two trees that truly open the door to lifelong prosperity, we must first learn to recognize the ones that keep it closed. Let your entrance breathe, and fortune will know where to find you. Plant 1, Jasmine, the emotional connector that softens every arrival. In Feng Shui, the area in front of your home, particularly the space directly facing the main door, is called the mouth of Kai. It is the point where all external energy flows into your living space. This is not symbolic. It is a functional principle. The clearer, more open, and energetically balanced this space is, the easier it becomes for opportunity, peace, and ebb. And yet, one of the most common mistakes in modern home arrangement is made right here, through well-intended but misaligned planting. A tree placed too close to the entrance might offer shade, but energetically it acts as a shield. A pot that leans inward, a plant with sharp edges, or a creeping vine that spills over the path, each disrupts the natural flow of energy into your space. These disruptions are not always visible in the obvious sense. They show up in how you feel when you enter your home, in how well your plans unfold, or in the kind of momentum you experience across why. Many people place trees for aesthetic reasons, to decorate, to add greenery, or to frame the entrance. But few pause to ask whether the energy of that tree supports the movement they need in their life right now. Trees, like people, have energetic personalities. Some are grounding, some are uplifting, some are chaotic. And some, though beautiful, are simply too dominant for the delicate task of guarding your. When the energy around your entrance becomes heavy, cluttered, or misaligned, the result is stagnation. Wealth may still come to you, but it won't stay. Relationships may form, but they won't deepen. Ideas may spark, but they won't take root. The front entrance sets the tone. It is the first invitation and the first warning, and the plants that live there are not neutral. Energy entering your home moves like breath. It must be able to inhale freely. If you place a large object, a dense tree, a dark shrub, or even too many pots right in front of the mouth of your home, the breath shortens. Kai becomes restricted, and you begin to experience this as resistance, a vague sense that things are harder than they should be, that small tasks take more effort, that peace feels just out of reach. Even worse is when the plant creates directional conflict. In Feng Shui, the way a tree grows upward or outward, inward or diagonally, affects the directional harmony of your home. A tree that tilts toward your door signals incoming pressure. A plant that spreads aggressively may dilute focus. A thorny or spiked plant creates defensive energy, and unknowingly, you start living in a home that repels rather than receives. People often report subtle symptoms. Guests leave quickly, moods feel heavier, sleep becomes restless, financial flow becomes uneven. They blame the economy, their schedules, or personal stress. But beneath all those factors, the environment has shifted, and a plant they once thought helpful has become a quiet wall. This is not about superstition. It is about the physics of space. A single object placed within the first 5 feet of your door can alter the air current, the light angle, and the psychological tone of your home. Multiply that effect by days, weeks, months, and it is no surprise that your home's energy field starts to bend. That is why the first correction in Feng Shui is not always to plant something new, but to review what is already present. What has been sitting there so long, you no longer see it. What has outgrown its container? What has stopped blooming or started leaning or faded without being noticed? Removal is not loss, it is opening. It is space. It is the breath your home needs in order to call fortune back. Begin with clarity, stand at your door. Look at what surrounds it. Does the path feel open? Can you walk in without dodging a branch, without stepping sideways, without brushing up against leaves or pots that claim too much space? Can energy flow here, or does it stop, hesitate, get confused? Small changes matter. Shifting a plant 1 foot to the side, trimming back a limb, removing an object that no longer belongs. These are not cosmetic decisions, they are energetic recalibrations. When you clear the threshold, you realign the message your home is sending to the world. Because energy will always choose the path of least resistance. If your door is clear and your entrance is balanced, prosperity knows exactly where to arrive. Not every tree blesses the space it stands in. Some close more doors than they open. And if you've ever felt that something good was trying to reach you, but couldn't quite enter, look again at what's growing near your door. The answer may be rooted there, waiting to be seen. Plant 2, a Glomma, the wealth accelerator for stuck energies. Some homes feel like they are waiting, not in stillness, not in peace, but in suspension, as if something is supposed to move but hasn't. The ideas are there, the work is being done, the people are trying, yet momentum remains elusive. Days repeat, progress circles, money comes close, then pulls back. In Feng Shui, this is not merely a psychological phase. It is the symptom of blocked energy flow, and it often begins at the threshold, where energy is meant to ignite but instead lies dormant. That is where a Glomma comes in. Often overlooked in favor of more decorative plants, a Glomma holds a specific purpose: to break energetic inertia. It is not subtle, it is not ceremonial, it is a catalyst. Where Jasmine gently harmonizes, a Glomma stirs. It moves what has been still for too long. The plant itself speaks through its appearance. Unlike traditional wealth plants that feature green alone, a Glomma displays leaves streaked with red, pink, and deep green, a trinity of color representing momentum, nourishment, and grounded expansion. In elemental language, these colors call in the energies of Mars, fire and action, Jupiter, growth and nurturing, and Venus, stability and long-term prosperity. But it is not the colors alone that shift the field, it is their interaction. When placed correctly, a Glomma does not just beautify a space, it becomes a starter engine for financial flow. Its energy spirals outward like a signal flare, telling the universe and your subconscious that you are ready for movement. It clears internal hesitation, opens external channels, and accelerates intention into tangible action. This makes a Glomma particularly valuable in environments where things have stalled. A business with no new clients, a home where arguments repeat, a person who feels stuck between decisions. It also supports transitions, launching a new venture, returning to work after a break, or recovering from financial disruption. It doesn't bring the result itself. It brings the spark that gets everything moving again. But like all catalysts, it must be placed with care. A Glomma needs light, not necessarily direct sun, but clarity of space. It thrives in areas with movement. Near a hallway, beside an entry table, close to a light source, or in places where decisions are made. A desk, a phone station, a place where mail arrives. In Feng Shui terms, this is the money in direction, usually to the right of the front door when viewed from inside. That is where energy enters with intent, and a Glomma's colors amplify that arrival. What it does not respond well to is stagnation. A corner that collects dust, a shelf above head height, or a space with no air circulation, these dead zones will silence the plant's energetic function. It may survive biologically, but its field goes dormant. The leaves may dull, the shape may wilt, the message becomes muddled. Energetically, the health of a Glomma is an indicator of your inner readiness. When the plant begins to fade, it is often a reflection of unclear priorities, scattered focus, or hidden resentment. When it glows, when the colors deepen, and the leaves feel firm and alive, it is a sign that your energetic door is open and that the internal systems of growth are aligned. There is also a psychological aspect to a Glomma's influence. Its vibrancy reminds us that prosperity is not always quiet. There are times when money moves loudly, with bold steps, sharp clarity, and unapologetic action. A Glomma is not about whispering your desires. It is about stating them clearly, planting them visibly, and placing them in the stream of your daily choices. That is why it belongs in living spaces, not spiritual corners. It needs to be part of your financial rhythm, where you take calls, where you write, where you make purchases or store paperwork. If placed near a porch light, its leaves reflect brightness back into the home, a visual affirmation that says, "Wealth is welcome, movement is active, and the cycle has begun." Still, like all good movement, there must be direction. A Glomma without intention can become scattered. Too many placed around the house may create energy that buzzes but doesn't land. It is best used sparingly, 1 or 2 well-placed pots in areas where action needs ignition. Caring for the plant is part of the energetic exchange. Keep the soil loose, not too wet. Wipe the leaves gently, not just for appearance, but to keep its listening surface clear. Like all active plants, it absorbs what surrounds it, and in doing so, it also offers feedback. If the leaves begin curling, ask yourself, where am I resisting progress? Where am I holding back? This is why a Glomma is often referred to as the mirror of action. It doesn't tell you what to do. It shows you whether you're doing it with full alignment. For people with earth element profiles, those who are strong, dependable, and long-term focused, a Glomma is especially helpful. Earth types tend to move slowly and can fall into patterns of over-preparation. A Glomma activates their forward motion without disturbing their foundation. Paired with the money tree, it creates a powerful current, action initiated, stability sustained. But even outside the 5-element match, the plant is broadly compatible, especially for those who feel like things are almost ready to happen, but not quite. When paired with clean space, clear goals, and mindful placement, a Glomma becomes more than a plant. It becomes a signal tower, broadcasting readiness, inviting opportunity, and gently breaking the spell of waiting. And sometimes that's all a space needs. Not a revolution, not a renovation. Just a flicker of new motion in the right place. A single flame that reminds energy it is allowed to move again. When you see red veins brightening along a fresh leaf, or watch how light dances off its multicolored surface at dawn, you'll understand. Movement has returned. And movement, especially the right kind, is what brings fortune through the door ready to stay. Plant 3, Shepherra, the silent shield that holds your wealth in place. There are times when what we need is not more momentum, but more stability. In Feng Shui, as in life, movement without grounding leads to scattered results, like wind that blows without purpose, or rain that never settles into the soil. And when it comes to wealth, the ability to hold what arrives is just as vital as the ability to attract it. That's where Shepherra quietly enters the conversation, not as a magnet, not as a spark, but as a container. This is a plant that doesn't draw attention. Its leaves are not flamboyant. Its shape is modest, symmetrical, and soft. Yet its energy field is deeply grounded, a steady, consistent pulse that echoes resilience and quiet order. Known in many Feng Shui circles as the longevity plant, Shepherra's true strength lies not in what it adds, but in what it prevents from leaking away. Shepherra's leaves grow in clusters, often in groupings of 5 to 8. This is more than an aesthetic feature. It mirrors the natural spirals of energy circulation, a kind of inner vortex that supports convergence, protection, and continuity. Placed near a door, along a hallway, or in the natural flow between rooms, it acts like a soft filter. It doesn't stop movement, but it smooths turbulence. It keeps the energy field intact, particularly in homes that experience financial ups and downs, or emotional highs followed by sudden crashes. You might notice the difference most clearly in spaces that have long struggled to retain wealth. The pattern is familiar. Money comes in but doesn't last. Promotions happen, then dissolve. Projects gain traction, then stall. It's not that abundance doesn't arrive. It's that the energetic container of the home cannot hold it. In such cases, no amount of wealth-enhancing symbols will help unless the foundation is stabilized. Shepherra becomes that unseen foundation. From an elemental perspective, this plant carries a neutral tone, harmonizing especially well with fire, earth, and wood energy types. That neutrality is key. It doesn't clash. It doesn't dominate. Instead, it bridges. In homes where residents have mixed elemental profiles, where one partner is earth, another water, or one child is fire, another metal, Shepherra creates a quiet, harmonizing current. Without saying a word, it calms the energetic room. What makes this plant especially suited for entry zones or central walkways is its quiet discipline. It grows slowly, evenly, and consistently. It doesn't require intense sunlight or excessive watering. In fact, it prefers moderate conditions, a metaphor perhaps for the type of wealth it supports. Consistent, long-term, earned rather than forced. It's the plant of savings accounts, of family inheritance, of reliable income streams. The kind of abundance that is not flashy but enduring. In offices or home businesses, Shepherra plays a protective role. It guards the space from energy leaks caused by stress, rushed decisions, or the emotional chaos of fast-moving environments. It's particularly helpful in rooms where people gather to talk about money, negotiation rooms, desks with tax files, or counters where payment is received. Instead of amplifying energy, it absorbs volatility. It tempers highs and protects against lows, but Shepherra is not passive. It responds to the care it receives. Left in neglect in a dusty corner or surrounded by clutter, the plant will begin to dull. Its leaves droop and its rhythm falters. That's not just biological decline, it's energetic reflection. A dull Shepherra often mirrors a space where order has slipped. It's a gentle nudge, a signal to clean, to rebalance, to listen again to the quiet structures that hold life together. Placement is essential. Too far from human interaction and the plant becomes dormant. Too close to overly active corners, near TVs, aggressive electronics, or constantly shifting energy zones, and its neutral field gets overwhelmed. The best placement is where transition occurs slowly. Beside a bedroom door, in an entry hallway, or along the movement path between a main room and the kitchen. There, it does its real work, not in attracting, but in retaining. For people who are naturally fast-moving, entrepreneurs, creatives, or fire element types who thrive on quick starts, Shepherra offers balance. It holds the ground beneath the sprint. For those who are more cautious or earth-aligned, the plant enhances patience without dulling ambition. And in multi-generational homes, it helps create emotional continuity, reducing friction, encouraging quiet support, and holding space through family cycles. One of Shepherra's gifts is that it doesn't demand visibility. It can live quietly beside a bookshelf, under a window with soft light, or near a shoe rack by the door. As long as it's not physically blocked or energetically drowned, it will continue to do what it does best: protect the rhythm of wealth from being interrupted. That rhythm, the financial heartbeat of a home, is not measured in windfalls. It's measured in how steady things feel, in whether money comes and goes in a predictable wave, in whether decisions hold or shift like sand, in whether the emotional field of the house supports generosity without fear. Shepherra is not the plant that brings a sudden win. It is the plant that helps you keep what you've already earned. That prevents the quick draining of luck. That shields the roots of your fortune while the rest of the world moves in noise. If you've ever felt like money slips through your fingers, if you've ever started saving, only to spend again under pressure, if you've watched growth begin, then collapse under stress, this is the plant for you. Not every wealth remedy needs to shine. Some just need to stay. Shepherra is how your home says, we are building something that lasts, not just for now, but for every season to come. Plant 4, Money Tree, the quiet magnet that attracts and anchors abundance. Not all wealth arrives like a wave. Some fortune builds slowly, quietly beneath the surface, not in bursts, but in layers. There are homes where you don't feel immediate excitement, but something deeper: steadiness, warmth, a sense that things are simply, well, that nothing is leaking and everything has a place. This kind of energy doesn't happen by chance. It's cultivated. And among all Feng Shui plants, none embodies that calm financial gravity better than the money tree. With its braided trunk and lush green canopy, the money tree carries a reputation that often overshadows its subtlety. People see it as a symbol of abundance, a lucky charm. But in truth, its power doesn't come from appearance, it comes from structure. The way it gathers energy and holds it. The way it becomes a center of gravity in a home, where scattered financial chi slowly gathers and settles. Unlike plants that activate or shield, the money tree harmonizes. Its roots connect with the wood element, encouraging growth and upward movement. But its braided trunk contains the essence of metal, stability, memory, consolidation. These two energies are often at odds in the 5-element cycle, but in the money tree, they coexist. They balance. That's what gives it its unique ability to draw in wealth and then hold it gently without gripping. When placed in the right position, the money tree becomes like a magnet of calm prosperity. It doesn't pull in fast luck or chaotic gain. Instead, it nurtures income streams that are steady, collaborative, and built on trust. In homes with this plant near the entryway or financial corner, there's often a feeling that negotiations go smoother, bills align more easily, and business conversations carry less friction. People speak with more clarity. Choices feel more measured. Money stops rushing and begins to stay. This is especially important in homes or businesses where income is frequent, but outcomes are inconsistent, where effort is high, but the results feel unpredictable. In such spaces, the energetic field lacks an anchor. The money tree provides that anchor, acting like a container of wealth intentions. It becomes a point of energetic convergence, where multiple flows meet and merge. One of the secrets of this plant lies in its adaptability. It does not need full sunlight, nor does it require constant attention. It prefers consistency in light, watering, and placement. It asks not to be moved too often, nor placed in turbulent areas like right next to loud electronics or drafty doors. The ideal position is in the southeast corner, the traditional Feng Shui wealth area, or near the main entrance, but off to one side where it can see and influence without dominating. When you care for a money tree, you are not just maintaining a plant. You are tending to your relationship with stability itself. A layer of dust on its leaves can symbolize financial neglect. Dry, compacted soil may mirror a sense of energetic tightness, too much control, not enough breath. The tree's health becomes a mirror for your inner financial rhythm. In practical life, the money tree suits those who value long-term growth over fast wins. Those building a family business, managing shared resources, or transitioning from high-risk careers into more grounded paths. It supports people who want to grow something that will endure, a foundation, a legacy, a stream that continues beyond individual effort. It is also deeply supportive for Venus-ruled individuals, those in fields of beauty, relationships, design, or partnership. The tree enhances clarity in exchanges, reduces emotional entanglement in transactions, and encourages a kind of loving boundary around wealth. It helps you hold what is yours, not with fear, but with quiet confidence. Even if you are not aligned with Venus or wood, the plant remains a safe addition to almost any space, especially if your financial field feels chaotic, draining, or disconnected from your inner sense of purpose. One of the most overlooked effects of the money tree is its influence on energetic posture. When placed at eye level with space around it to breathe, it trains your attention. It reminds you to look up, to meet your finances not with avoidance or urgency, but with steadiness. It becomes a living anchor in the room, saying without words, you can hold this. You don't have to chase. You can let it stay. This plant is also known to interact well with light, not bright sun, but gentle morning light. When positioned near a window that receives a soft glow, the leaves seem to shimmer slightly, especially when freshly cleaned. That shimmer is symbolic, a visible response to care, to presence, to relationship. Just as money responds to the attention we give it, not obsession, but steady regard, so does the money tree thrive under clear, consistent conditions. Its energy is not reactive, it is receptive. That makes it especially valuable in homes where emotional volatility has impacted financial decision-making, where money has been tied to stress, uncertainty, or unresolved family dynamics. In those spaces, the money tree acts not just as a prosperity tool, but as a healing presence, turning financial survival into financial connection. And still, it asks for so little: a clean pot, space to breathe, a quiet corner to do its work. No dramatics, no rituals, just the invitation to become what it was always designed to be: a quiet magnet. One that draws wealth, holds it in stillness, and teaches the entire home how to exhale in peace. If you've ever felt like you're always working harder than the return, if your home carries echoes of financial instability, if you're ready for not just more income, but a new relationship with money itself, the money tree waits not as a cure, but as a companion. It doesn't chase wealth, it holds space for it, and when it finds a home where it's truly respected, it stays. Plant 5, Snake Plant, the sword that protects your home's energetic gate. Not all energy that enters a home is kind. Some carry weight unseen but deeply felt. They drift in through open windows, ride in on conversations, hide in the pause between one visitor leaving and another arriving. They are not evil but misaligned, static, tired, heavy. And while some plants welcome, soothe, or stabilize energy, there are moments when what a space needs most is protection. Not aggression, but a quiet, unwavering boundary. This is what the snake plant brings. Also known as mother-in-law's tongue or sansevieria, the snake plant stands tall with sword-like leaves that rise upward without hesitation. In Feng Shui, that posture matters. Energy follows direction. When a plant points decisively upward, it strengthens vertical flow, encouraging clarity, decisiveness, and upward movement in life force. But this is more than symbolism. The plant's very form functions like a silent guardian. Not shouting, not blocking, just standing there, watching, holding the gate. Unlike the money tree which draws wealth in or jasmine which softens emotion, the snake plant doesn't invite, it inspects. It filters, it decides. In energetic terms, it establishes a threshold boundary, making clear what belongs and what must stay outside. This is crucial for homes located on busy streets, near chaotic intersections, or in high-traffic buildings. Environments where energy comes and goes quickly can erode the inner calm of a space. The snake plant catches that chaos at the edge and deflects it before it enters. Its association with Mars and Saturn, planets of action, boundary, and discipline, makes it particularly useful for people who are energetically sensitive, emotionally absorbent, or prone to overthinking. For these individuals, the home can too easily become a sponge for other people's problems. By placing snake plants at key entry points, beside the front door, along corridor ends, or in shadowed corners, the house is given a kind of energetic immune system. This is not about fear. The plant doesn't reject all energy, it simply strengthens the line. It says, only what is aligned may pass, and it does this without conflict. There is no fight, just presence. Interestingly, the snake plant also works on a physical level. Scientific studies have shown it filters toxins like formaldehyde, benzene, and carbon dioxide. It absorbs electromagnetic radiation and converts carbon dioxide into oxygen, even at night, when most plants stop. This makes it especially valuable in rooms with electronic overload. Near Wi-Fi routers, behind TVs, beside computers, or in home offices where mental clarity often battles digital fatigue. But its strength can also become a challenge. The snake plant carries strong yang energy, focused, active, assertive. When placed too close to the bed, especially near the head, it can cause subtle disruptions, restless sleep, overactive thinking, or feelings of vigilance during nighttime hours. That's why, despite its many strengths, it is best positioned near external boundaries, not personal rest zones. Proper placement enhances its protective field. Ideal locations include either side of the front door. Symmetrical pairs work especially well. Near sliding doors that face outward, or in the northwest corner of a room. A direction associated with protection, helpful people, and guardian energy in Feng Shui tradition. It also thrives on balconies, facing outward toward busy streets or sources of tension, creating a visual and energetic gate. For those living in apartments or in buildings where neighbors and energy streams are tightly layered, the snake plant offers privacy without isolation. It keeps the inner atmosphere distinct, gently reminding the home where it ends and others begin. And yet, for all its structure, this plant is surprisingly forgiving. It survives with minimal care, little water, low light, infrequent attention. But the more you tend to it, the more it reflects strength back. Cleaning its leaves, keeping its pot well drained, and ensuring it is not crowded are simple ways to maintain its quiet shield. From an emotional perspective, the presence of a snake plant often brings clarity. It reduces energetic noise. Thoughts become more organized. Decisions feel easier. For people recovering from emotional burnout or for homes that have recently experienced conflict or grief, it serves as a kind of energetic reset button. It holds the perimeter while the heart mends. For metal element individuals, those drawn to logic, structure, and strategy, this plant reinforces their natural strengths. For fire types, it offers balance, a cooling clarity that helps maintain direction without overheating. For earth types, it provides a clear edge, defining the boundaries that they often overlook in favor of comfort. If you're someone who often feels tired when returning home, or if you notice emotional shifts in the household after visitors leave, the snake plant might be more than a decorative choice. It might be exactly what your threshold needs. It's worth noting that its power does not lie in flash or fragrance. The plant doesn't bloom with color or draw the eye. It simply stands where it is placed, quietly absorbing what doesn't belong and supporting the flow of what does. In Feng Shui, this kind of plant is rare. One that doesn't seek attention but creates it. One that doesn't change your life but makes sure your life stays on course. One that doesn't open the door but keeps it safe once it's open. If your home already has movement, joy, or abundance, but lacks calm. If your goals are clear, but your thoughts feel scrambled. If your space feels porous, like energy comes in and then disappears without a trace, then the snake plant may be the sword you need at your gate. Not to strike, not to scare, but to stand. To say, this is where the peace begins, and here it shall remain. Final, not every home needs more things. Sometimes what a space truly needs is a better conversation with itself, a clearer invitation, a gentler breath, a more deliberate way of receiving the life waiting outside the door. Each tree we've explored is more than a plant. It's a presence, a quiet participant in the rhythm of your home. And when chosen with awareness, it becomes part of the way you speak to the world, how you welcome, how you protect, how you grow, how you stay. Jasmine whispers softness where the heart once closed. A Glomma stirs the breath of motion into still corners. Shepherra holds what's already yours so nothing spills. The money tree gathers not to chase but to keep. And the snake plant stands not to block, but to hold the line between chaos and calm. You don't need all of them. You don't even need many. You just need two placed not by trend, but by truth. Not because someone else swears by them, but because your home, your life, your energy recognizes the invitation. So today, don't just ask what to plant. Ask what your home is ready to receive. And then plant that. Let your entrance breathe again. Let your space remember how to listen. Let something alive take root, not just in soil, but in the quiet rhythm of your becoming. Because sometimes the smallest shift, a single tree placed with intention, opens a door you didn't even know was closed. What are you truly inviting in?